Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this week's Global Dawah Movement Show. I'm joined in the studios by Imran Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you?
I'm good.
Very good.
Good. So, this week's show, we're going to be talking about atheism, evidence and certainty.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, me and you and a lot of duaat have been out there engaging in conversations about Islam.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we come across some atheists, right?
We come across loads of atheists.
We come across a lot of atheists, right? And some of them even watch this show,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And when we do that, when we're trying to engage in conversations about theology, theism, there's always a common question that they seem to ask.
Yeah.
It's a common theme.
Yeah, and what we're referring to is they ask for evidence, basically,
Yes.
right? And it's fine for them to ask for evidence because that's how discussions start, and that's the
Yes.
sort of route that discussions with atheists normally take. It's based on evidence, which is fine. They ask for evidence for God's existence.
Yes.
That's not a problem. What we want to discuss in this show is what are the presuppositions behind the inquiry, right?
Right.
So what I mean by this is what type of evidence, what are they looking for when they ask for evidence for God's existence, right?
Yes.
This is important, and I believe it's important for several reasons. One being that unless we can understand what they're looking for, we'll just give them whatever we can, but it may not be what they want.
They
right?
may not be satisfied.
Or it might not be the correct approach. They may
Right.
be asking the wrong question, right?
Okay.
So unless we establish these foundations of the discussion first, we won't have a productive discussion,
Fine.
right? So what I want to discuss today is this very thing. And what the first thing I want to discuss is this, is that generally, from experience and from seeing other brothers discuss with atheists and seeing other conversations, generally speaking, when atheists ask for evidence, they are looking for a particular type of evidence.
Right.
And that type of evidence is physical evidence, scientific evidence, empirical data, basically,
Yes.
right? For God's existence.
Yes.
Now, straight off the bat, this is the wrong approach, right? It's not correct. Why? All it takes is understanding the nature of God and understanding the nature of science, right?
Yes.
Now, we know from the Islamic perspective that God is not physical. Okay, Allah is unlike anything we can imagine, as Allah says in the Quran, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." He's unlike anything you can imagine, basically.
Yes.
Right? He created the physical universe. He created everything that exists, but He's not a part of it, and He's unlike it.
Yes.
Right? We can't imagine God. We can't quantify God in a physical way, in any way, shape, or form. Right?
Yes.
Understanding this about the nature of God, and also understanding the nature of science, which is science is based on or can deal with things what are observable, right? It deals with observable realities. It can't deal with things which are beyond this,
Right.
right? And understanding these two things, then you can't use or ask for empirical scientific data for God, because when you inquire scientifically, you're looking
Yes.
for observable things. But in the case of God, God is not physically observable and is not limited. You can't quantify God empirically or scientifically, directly at least, right? So understanding this, asking for empirical data or evidence for God is wrong, right? Now, some atheists at this point may, say, fine, okay, I understand that point. Now let's discuss what else do you have. Give me some rational argumentation, so on. Fine, we can discuss on that level.
Yes.
But now we are having a good discussion, right, at this point. But there are some atheists and individuals who even at this point won't be satisfied, right? Because they have this preconception, this presupposition that scientific evidence is the only way to truth.
The only means to truth.
Only way to truth. This is called scientism, basically, right? And whether atheists or generally people who are inquiring
Yes.
believe this, accept this, not, there is this undertone in society, which is that they hold this idea, or they see the world through the lenses of scientism, or a form of scientism. What I mean by this is, there is this underlying idea that things we believe in, or we should believe in, should be empirically validated. Right?
It's true, but science works. Science works in society.
Of course it works. Well, we're not saying science doesn't work. What we're saying is science isn't the only way to truth.
Right,
Right?
okay, that's the
This is the
difference.
difference. And I have a very interesting quote that I came across earlier. It's by Freeman Dyson, and I think he really sums this up well when he says, the public has a distorted view of science because children are taught in schools that science is a collection of firmly established truths. In fact, science is not a collection of truths, it is a continuing exploration of mysteries.
Wow.
Right? So essentially what he's saying, and he makes a very valid point, that science doesn't deal with facts. Right? Science is something you use, it's a method, and it can bring you close to certainty, close to truth, but it can't give you 100% truth. We're going to discuss this near the end.
Right.
But the point being, it's not the only way to truth, but although our social environment it's built in a way which we're informed, or we're programmed, if you like, in a way to grow up believing or thinking that science is the best way to truth, or the only way to truth,
Yes.
right? When it's not. Right? So we have to correct this understanding. And scientism isn't true anyway. Science isn't the only way to truth. Because, I mean, let's look at a simple example. Try to prove the statement, science is the only way to truth, scientifically. You can't do it.
You can't
right?
do it.
If science was the only way to truth, you would never know that to be true.
Absolutely, yeah.
You would never be able to substantiate that, validate that, right? So it doesn't work. If that was the case, you would have to reject all other types of truths: moral truths, ethical truths, mathematical truths, logical truths. Many things science uses itself, right? But you can't validate them scientifically. It doesn't make sense,
yes.
right? So holding on to scientism it's not correct. Right. Now, whether that's you're doing that deliberately or whether that's been, that's just been programmed into you as you grow up, either way, you have to let go of this notion of scientism, right? Science isn't the only way to truth. I just want to drive this home, right? Now, the next thing I want to move on to quickly is understanding that you can't have empirical data, direct scientific observations for God, right? Understanding scientism isn't true for the sake of argument, right? If for somehow you could give empirical data for God's existence, direct observable data for God's existence, would that give the atheist certainty? And I would argue no, right? So what they're looking for, the certainty they're looking for via the inquiry through science, will not give them certainty in the first place, even if you could give it. That's if you could give empirical data for God, which you can't. You can't give scientific proof.
Why wouldn't scientific evidence lead to certainty?
Good. We've discussed this many times before, and that is one problem being the problem of induction. Right?
Yes.
And we know the problem of induction, and this is just one problem which highlights that science can't give you absolute truth.
Absolutely.
Right? Because according to the problem of induction, you go from a limited set of data always, and you formulate a general conclusion based on that limited set of data.
Right.
And it's possible that your future observations will be different.
Yes.
Right. An example we give is, imagine you're a scientist, you're commissioned to observe sheep in the fields of London. You spend 6 months in the fields of London, you observe sheep, and you see that all sheep that you've observed, so you observe 20,000 sheep, are white. Right? Now, it's possible that the next sheep or the next 10 sheep are brown. But based on your data so far, you've only observed white sheep, and therefore you conclude that all sheep in the fields of London are white. Right? You induce this, right? But it's not 100% true. Right? So this is the problem. So science can't give you certainty anyway. That's if you can ask a question about if you can ask for scientific evidence for God, which you can't do anyway.
You can't, yes. Right? Beyond the realms of science.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is this. When an atheist approaches a Muslim and wants to discuss God's existence with him, you cannot approach him with a mindset of scientism. It's unrealistic, it doesn't make sense, and it's wrong.
Yep. I mean, it gives a skewed picture of the world anyway.
Yeah, and it gives you a skewed perspective. If you approach a Muslim from that perspective, you're asking for something which you can't ask for. It doesn't make sense, right? You're asking for physical evidence for God, but we know God isn't physical. Simple, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there are many other means to truth. For example, we know that we have rational ways of discussing things, right? We have deductive reasoning. We have authentic and valid testimony. That's another route to truth. It's something that's used in science as well.
Yes.
And there's many other means to truth. And the last thing we want to discuss, and I know you wanted to touch upon this, was from a Muslim perspective. Now I'm going to ask you the question.
Yes.
What is our means to the truth of God?
Well, yeah, this is important to understand, and especially for atheists, when we're engaging in discussions, is to understand the Muslim perspective when it comes to a means to truth. As Muslims, what we believe that everyone is born upon this fitrah. And what fitrah means is this natural, innate state, which means, believing in God is something that is built into you, which is programmed into you. And what's interesting about this is even studies have been conducted to show this is a true statement, that we believe that first and foremost that we are programmed to believe in God. And then we use rational arguments, rational reasoning to come to the conclusion that there must be a creator. Yeah. And then we get our knowledge. We understand, when it comes to the real world, there's two types of knowledge. There's acquired knowledge, which is knowledge which we gain from understanding the world, studying the natural world, but also revealed knowledge. And we understand that the Quran is the final revelation to God.
I mean, the Prophet ﷺ said that every child is born in the fitrah,
Absolutely.
Right? This innate disposition, right?
Yes.
So what we're saying is that the belief in God, first of all, is innate knowledge. This is the third type of knowledge, right, that we claim. and it's God has placed this within us,
Yes.
right? And obviously we have also rational faculties that we've been blessed with, and we
Yes.
can engage in rational discussion and argumentation,
Absolutely.
and we have good reasons to believe rationally God exists as well. And on top of it, we can use empirical data.
Yes.
But here's the point we need to understand. We can use empirical data. We can look at what science is showing us.
Yes.
And then based on that information and data, we can infer what best explains these realities.
Yes.
Right? So you can say, in other words, it's indirect
Yes.
evidence for God's existence, right?
Absolutely.
Not direct. So, for example, you can look at the universe, and you can look at the order in the universe, the laws that govern the universe, and so on. You can say, you know what? There must be a lawgiver because there's laws that are present in the universe, right?
Yes.
So you can infer based on the
Yes.
evidence, but this is indirect, okay?
Yes.
So we have many other. It's more of a holistic approach
Absolutely.
to reality, right? And I think it's beautiful as well because it shows the greatness of God. You know,
Yes.
God is not limited to direct observation. God is beyond all of these physical things,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think Numan Ali Khan, just to finish off, made a beautiful point. He said, you know, animals require physical evidence, right?
Yes.
If there's a fire in a building and there's an announcement made that, you know, there's a fire, evacuate the building, the cat that's sitting in the building is not going to go anywhere.
Yes.
The cat's going to stay there unless it sees the fire or feels the fire, and then unless it gets the observable evidence, then it will move.
Yes.
But the human being has rational faculties,
Yes.
right? He will hear the announcement and he think, you know what, it's probably safe I leave, right?
Or make the rational.
You make the rational choice.
decision.
So there's
Yeah.
many other means to truth and understanding reality and the world. And scientism, it's just flawed, and asking for or holding the view that unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true. It's just a flawed way of approaching.
It's a
things.
flawed way, and it gives you an unbalanced view of the world. You know, when you're looking through the world through that lens, you need to have a balanced approach. And we believe this is the best approach to understanding the world and to ultimately to live your life.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Brother Hamza has a beautiful argument based on the fitra itself, this
Yes.
innate disposition. It's not just a wild claim that we're making. There is evidence to support this. We can link in the paper,
the video, yes,
the video of the paper, and people can go study that further as well.
Yeah, and just to conclude, you know, for all you atheists, God is not a scientific hypothesis, right?
Yeah, as Dawkins would say. And this is the problem: is popularizers like Dawkins who push this narrative, God is a scientific hypothesis. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
Yes, he has a PhD. He's made many wild claims in the past, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean they're true, right? So we need to start inquiring and thinking about these things ourselves.
So I hope that's been beneficial. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and join us for next week's Global Dawah Movement Show. Assalamu alaikum.